Hey, welcome! Today we are cracking open a really fascinating and, let's be honest, often overlooked collection of writings called the Apocrypha. Think of these as the stories caught in that 400-year gap between the Old and New Testaments. And this period, it was filled with epic battles, profound wisdom, and incredible visions of the future. So what can these hidden books actually teach us? Let's dive in and find out.
So you ever wonder what happened in that big 400-year gap, between the last prophet of the Old Testament and when John the Baptist shows up? Well, it wasn't quiet. It was a time of immense turmoil, oppression, and massive change. And the books of the Apocrypha, they are our window into that world, showing us exactly how people of faith wrestled with these huge challenges.
So that word, Apocrypha, it literally means hidden things. And for many people, that's exactly what these texts are, hidden. They were written during that dramatic period right between the Testaments, and they're a mix of everything: history, stories, wisdom. Their status has always been debated, which is a whole other story, but one thing is for sure: they are packed with powerful lessons. And that's our real question today: what do these texts teach us?
Okay, so let's start with something you might not expect. You might think these are all just dry theological texts, but nope, they are filled with absolutely gripping stories of courage against impossible odds. This is where faith gets tested right on the battlefield.
To really get the courage, you first have to understand the crisis. In the book of Maccabees, we meet this guy, King Antiochus. He marches on Jerusalem, storms the temple, steals all the sacred items, and, as the text puts it, made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. He just completely outlaws their traditions, turning their entire world upside down.
But in the face of all that tyranny, one family refused to bow: the Maccabees. They decided that their faith was absolutely worth fighting for. Now, picture this. They were just a small band of rebels going up against the full might of the massive Seleucid Empire. It was a true David versus Goliath situation. And here's the cool part. They didn't just fight with brute force. They thought with brilliant strategy. Take this one battle. The enemy commander sets a trap, right? He's trying to lure them out. But Jonathan Maccabeus, he sees it coming. And instead of a foolish charge, he does something incredible. He tells his men to just stand their ground, to just endure the attack all day long. He masterfully waits until the enemy is totally exhausted, then he launches his devastating counterattack. And the result of that crazy brave patience? 8,000. That's how many enemy soldiers fell that day. It was just a stunning victory that came from blending faith with unbelievable tactical genius.
But courage wasn't only found on the battlefield. Let's switch over to the book of Judith. Here, a city named Bethulia is surrounded by this huge Assyrian army. And after 34 days, the water runs out. People are fainting in the streets. They're telling their leaders, look, it's better to be slaves than to watch our kids die of thirst. All hope is completely lost.
And this is where the story takes a wild turn. A widow named Judith decides she's got to do something. She walks right into the enemy camp, gets into the tent of the head general, Holofernes, and, well, she beheads him. Can you imagine the scene when her messengers announce, "Behold, Holofernes lieth upon the ground without a head"? Absolute panic. The enemy army just shatters and they run. One woman's courage saved the entire nation.
Okay, so these stories teach us about acting with courage. But what happens when things are so bad that a military victory just seems impossible? What happens when you're oppressed and all you really have left is hope for a different kind of justice?
This is where we run into something called apocalyptic writing. I know, the word can sound pretty scary, but it's really a literature of hope for the hopeless. Through these strange, symbolic visions, these texts were trying to pull back the curtain on reality and show that, hey, behind the scenes of all this earthly suffering, a divine plan for justice was already in motion.
The book of 2 Esdras is a perfect example of this. The prophet Esdras, he's just heartbroken. He looks around at the world and sees his people suffering while their oppressors are doing just fine. And so he cries out to God, asking that question that we all ask, right? Why do good people suffer? Why does it seem like evil is winning? And in response, an angel gives Esdras this vision. He sees a raging fire and a violent storm. That's all the overwhelming troubles of the past. But then he sees what's left behind, just a little bit of smoke and a few drops of rain. The angel's point is so powerful. The worst is already over. The future, the good stuff is coming, and it's going to be so much bigger than the suffering that's left.
And that's the core teaching of these visions. They're a promise that suffering is temporary, that God has not forgotten his people, and that a day of rest, of justice, of deliverance It's coming. It's a powerful message of hope meant to get people through the absolute darkest of times.
All right, so from epic battles and cosmic visions, the Apocrypha also zooms way, way in. It teaches us not just how to face an empire or wait the end of the world, but how to navigate the challenges of just everyday life. Let's get into the practical wisdom in these hidden books.
So you've got the grand national scale of Maccabees and 2 Esdras on one side, right? But then you have books like Sirach and the Wisdom of Solomon, and they are just filled with practical, almost proverbial advice. They're focused on the individual. They're asking the question, how do I live a good, wise life right here, right now?
And the advice here is just incredibly sharp and timeless. For instance, Sirach has this really profound warning about the power of our words. He says, "The stroke of the whip maketh marks in the flesh, but the stroke of the tongue breaketh the bones." It's such a powerful reminder that, yeah, physical wounds heal, but the damage from cruel words, that can be so much deeper.
Or how about this piece of incredibly savvy advice? When should you pick your battles? Sirach warns, "Be not at variance with a rich man, lest he overweigh thee, for gold hath destroyed many." It's not about being a coward. It's about being wise and recognizing that when power and money are in the mix, the playing field often isn't level.
Oh, I love the nuance in this one. It's basically a guide to healthy friendships. It says, hey, don't believe every rumor you hear. If you have a problem with a friend, talk to them directly. And importantly, it recognizes that people mess up. Sometimes someone says something dumb, but it doesn't reflect their true heart. It's a call for grace and understanding. And it will end the wisdom section on this gem. Think about the consequences. Before you act, before you speak, just consider the long-term outcome. If you keep the end in mind, you're far less likely to make a mistake you'll regret. It's such a simple but incredibly powerful principle for living well.
So we've seen the epic courage, the cosmic hope, and the practical wisdom. Let's bring it all together now and answer our main question. What do these hidden books ultimately teach us?
So what have we learned? It really boils down to 3 powerful lessons. First, the stories of Judith and the Maccabees teach us that real faith isn't passive. It demands courageous action. Second, the visions of Esdras show us how to trust that even in the darkest night, a divine plan for justice is at work. And finally, the Proverbs of Sirach remind us that a good life isn't just about big moments. It's built on the small, daily choices of wisdom and how we treat each other. You know, whether it's the story of a hero on the battlefield, a prophet seeing a vision, or a father giving advice to his son, the one common thread running through all of the Apocrypha is resilience. It's a guide for how to endure, how to fight back, how to hope, and how to live with integrity in a world that is often just chaotic and unfair.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. These books were hidden or set aside for all sorts of reasons, but that doesn't mean they don't have value. It makes you wonder, in our own lives, in our own culture, what other wisdom might we be overlooking in the stories we've chosen to forget? Thank you so much for joining me.